I've always taken great pride in maintaining a sense of stability and predictability within my home. For as long as I can remember, I've strived to create an environment free from unnecessary drama, unexpected surprises, or chaotic disruptions. Instead, I've cultivated a calm, peaceful rhythm, a steady cadence that allows me to feel in control, grounded, and at ease. It's a rhythm that has become the backbone of my daily life, a comforting constant in a world that often feels anything but predictable. I truly believed I had mastered the art of preserving this delicate balance, that I had somehow outsmarted the unpredictability of life. But as I've come to learn, and as life so often reminds us, there's no such thing as complete control. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, disrupting even the most carefully constructed routines and forcing you to adapt, to grow, and sometimes to simply hold on. Let me take you back to the day it all began, the day that marked the beginning of a subtle but profound shift in the dynamics of our household. It was a Saturday morning, one of those blissfully lazy weekends where time seems to stretch endlessly before you, inviting you to slow down and savor the moment. The sun streamed through the windows, casting warm, golden beams across the room, and the gentle chirping of birds outside served as a natural alarm clock, coaxing me awake. It was the kind of morning that felt like a gift, a quiet reprieve from the usual hustle and bustle of life. I had a list of errands to run, but nothing too hectic, just the usual chores to keep the house in order. The day felt ordinary, almost mundane, and I fully expected it to remain that way. Little did I know it would be the calm before the storm. That morning I decided to wear a simple, comfortable outfit, a soft, flowing skirt and a casual top that felt just right for the relaxed pace of the day. As I stood in front of the mirror, giving myself a quick glance before heading out, I felt a sense of contentment. Everything was as it should be. My stepson, who had been living with us for a couple of years, passed by the doorway. At 20 years old, he was still figuring out his path in life, much like many young adults his age. He greeted me with a casual, "Good morning," and I smiled back, not thinking much of it at the time. It was a small, fleeting moment, one that would have been easy to overlook. But looking back, I realize it was the first hint of something deeper, something brewing beneath the surface. As the day went on, I began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He seemed quieter than usual, more reserved. He lingered around the living room or kitchen while I worked, as if he were searching for something, or perhaps avoiding something. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, we all have our off days, moments when we retreat into ourselves to process our thoughts and emotions. But over the next few days, I began to feel a shift in the way he interacted with me, with the world around him. It wasn't anything overt or dramatic, but there was a palpable change, a quiet tension that seemed to hover in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, he approached me. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice thoughtful, almost hesitant. I paused, my hand stilling over the sink as I turned to look at him. There was something in his tone, a vulnerability that caught me off guard. "I'm fine," I replied, studying his face. "But you seem quieter than usual. Is everything okay on your end?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering away for a moment before he nodded. "Yeah, just thinking about stuff," he said, brushing it off with a half smile. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, that he wanted to talk but wasn't sure how to start. Over time, I began to realize that he might simply be navigating the complexities of growing up, grappling with the uncertainties and challenges that come with transitioning into adulthood. It's a difficult phase of life, one that I remember all too well from my own youth. The weight of expectations, the pressure to figure out who you are and what you want, it can be overwhelming. And so, I decided to give him space, to let him process his thoughts and emotions in his own time, while remaining approachable and available if he needed me. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself keeping a closer eye on him, even though I tried not to. There were moments when I'd catch him staring out the window, lost in thought, or fidgeting with his phone as if he were waiting for something, or perhaps avoiding something. It was like he was a puzzle, and I could see all the pieces scattered around, but the picture wasn't quite clear. I wanted to help, to offer guidance or reassurance, but I also knew that some battles have to be fought alone. All I could do was be there, a steady presence in the background, ready to step in if he needed me. Then one evening, I came home from running some errands, and the air in the house felt different. It wasn't the usual calm, steady atmosphere that I had worked so hard to cultivate. Instead, there was a tension, a heaviness that seemed to press down on everything. My stepson was sitting on the couch looking unusually agitated. His legs bounced nervously, and he kept glancing at the clock, as if he were waiting for something, or dreading it. I sat down next to him, carefully choosing my words. "Hey, what's going on? You seem off," I said, my voice gentle but probing. He let out a long sigh, rubbing his forehead as if trying to chase away a headache. "I don't know," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm just, I don't know how to explain it." I leaned in, offering him a comforting presence without pushing him too much. "You don't have to explain anything you're not ready to," I said softly, "but I'm here if you want to talk." For a few moments there was only silence, the sound of our breathing filling the space between us. Then finally he spoke. "I've been feeling lost," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like everything is up in the air, and I don't know which direction to go in." His words hit me harder than I expected. I knew he was struggling, but hearing it from him so plainly, so vulnerably, made it real. It was a raw, unfiltered admission of the turmoil he was feeling, and it broke my heart a little. "It's okay to feel that way," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Growing up is tough, and it's normal to feel uncertain about things. You're not alone in that." He nodded, though it was clear that reassurance wasn't enough to lift the weight he was carrying. I stayed there with him for a while, just sitting in the silence. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is not to solve their problems, but to simply be there, offering them the space and support to figure it out on their own. As the days passed, I continued to watch him with a watchful eye, but without intrusion. I made sure to offer a listening ear when he needed it, but I also knew that the path he was walking was his to find. Little did I know that this period of quiet reflection would lead to an unexpected change in both of our lives, a change that would take me further out of my comfort zone than I ever imagined. But for now, I could only wait and hope that my presence in his life, however small, would help him find his way through the uncertainty. Weeks slipped by, and the atmosphere in the house remained unchanged, but there was an undercurrent of something more, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. My stepson continued to spend a lot of time in his room, only emerging for meals or when he needed something. I tried not to push, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense that there was something he wasn't telling me. Then one afternoon, while I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, I found my stepson standing there, holding a small package in his hands. "Hey," he said a little nervously, "I got this for you. It's nothing special, just a little something." I took the package from him, surprised by the gesture. He wasn't usually the type to give gifts, and his sudden kindness caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft, unsure of how to respond. He shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. "I know, but I wanted to. You've been so patient with me. I guess I just wanted to say thanks." I smiled warmly at him. "You don't have to thank me for being here for you. That's what family does." He gave a small nod, then turned to leave. But before he could step away, I called out to him. "Hey, want to talk about anything? I'm here, no pressure." For a moment he hesitated, the door frame framing his face. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to say something, but the uncertainty of how. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I don't know what I'm doing with my life," he admitted. "I thought I had it all figured out, but now everything feels like it's falling apart." I felt my heart ache for him. "You're not alone in that feeling," as I said gently. "Life doesn't come with a roadmap, and it's okay to feel lost sometimes. Just take it one step at a time, and know that it's okay to not have everything figured out right now." He nodded again, his eyes thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess you're right. It's just hard. I've been trying to push through it, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." The weight of his words sank in, and for a brief moment, I understood the full extent of what he was going through. His struggles weren't just the typical teenage growing pains. He was fighting battles I couldn't see, hidden in the corners of his mind. "I know it's tough," I said softly, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you. You can always talk to me when you're ready. For the first time in weeks, he looked me directly in the eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of hope. Thanks, he murmured before turning to leave. That small exchange, though brief, left me with a sense of peace. I knew he wasn't completely out of the storm yet, but maybe, just maybe, he was starting to find his way back to himself. And that was enough for me. The days that followed were marked by a delicate balance of quiet observation and gentle encouragement. I found myself paying closer attention to the small details, the way my stepson's shoulders slumped slightly when he thought no one was looking, the way he would pause mid-sentence, as if reconsidering his words before speaking. It was as though he was carrying a weight that no one else could see, a burden that he wasn't yet ready to share. And while I wanted nothing more than to lift that weight from him, I knew that some journeys have to be taken alone. All I could do was be there, a steady presence in the background, ready to offer support when he needed it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the house was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I found myself sitting on the porch, a cup of tea in hand. The air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers from the garden. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a rare pause in the otherwise busy rhythm of life. As I sat there, lost in thought, I heard the faint creak of the screen door opening. I turned to see my stepson stepping outside, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice tentative. I shook my head and gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Of course not. Sit down." He lowered himself into the chair, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were bracing himself for something. For a while we sat in silence, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled with words. But I could sense that he had something on his mind, something he was struggling to articulate. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "About life, about where I'm headed. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing." I turned to look at him, my heart aching at the vulnerability in his voice. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I feel like I'm stuck, like I'm just going through the motions without any real direction. I thought I had it all figured out, but now, I don't know. Everything feels so uncertain." His words resonated deeply with me, stirring memories of my own struggles and uncertainties at his age. I remembered the weight of expectations, the pressure to have everything figured out, and the fear of making the wrong choices. It was a universal experience, one that transcended generations. And yet, hearing it from him, seeing the pain and confusion in his eyes, made it feel all the more real. "I understand," I said softly. "I've been there too. It's easy to feel like you're the only one who's lost, but the truth is, most people feel that way at some point in their lives. It's part of growing up, part of figuring out who you are and what you want." He nodded, though it was clear that my words provided only a small measure of comfort. "I just wish I had more answers," he admitted. "I wish I knew what I was supposed to do." I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," I said. "Life isn't about having everything figured out. It's about taking it one step at a time, about learning and growing along the way. And it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. "But what if I make the wrong choice?" he asked, his voice tinged with fear. "What if I mess everything up?" I smiled gently, squeezing his shoulder. "You're not going to mess everything up," I said. "And even if you do make a wrong choice, it's not the end of the world. You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." He nodded again, though it was clear that he was still grappling with his doubts. "Thanks," he murmured, his voice barely audible. I needed to hear that." We sat there for a while longer, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding. It was a moment of connection, a reminder that even in the midst of uncertainty, we weren't alone. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that, no matter how difficult the journey, we would find our way through it together. The next few weeks were a mix of progress and setbacks. There were days when my stepson seemed lighter, more at ease, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He would engage in conversation, share small details about his day, and even crack the occasional joke. But there were also days when he retreated into himself, his mood somber and distant. It was a roller coaster of emotions, one that left me feeling both hopeful and helpless. One afternoon, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed a notebook lying open on the coffee table. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the page. It was filled with scribbled notes, sketches, and fragments of thoughts, a glimpse into the inner workings of his mind. There were lists of goals, questions about the future, and even a few lines of poetry. It was raw and unfiltered, a window into his struggles and aspirations. I quickly averted my gaze, feeling a pang of guilt for intruding on his privacy. But it also gave me a deeper understanding of what he was going through, a reminder that his struggles were more complex than they appeared on the surface. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to broach the subject gently. "I noticed your notebook on the coffee table earlier," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "You've got quite a creative mind." He looked up surprised and then shrugged. "Yeah, I guess. It's just something I do to clear my head." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "It's a good outlet," I said. "Sometimes putting your thoughts on paper can help make sense of them." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, it helps. Sometimes." It was a small step, but it felt like progress. Over the next few days, I noticed him spending more time writing, his notebook becoming a constant companion. He would sit at the kitchen table, lost in thought, his pen moving across the page as he poured his thoughts onto paper. It was a sign that he was beginning to process his emotions, to confront the uncertainties that had been weighing him down. And while I knew that the journey ahead was far from over, I felt a sense of relief knowing that he was taking steps toward healing. As the weeks turned into months, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. The tension that had once hung in the air slowly dissipated, replaced by a sense of calm and acceptance. My stepson seemed more at ease, more open to sharing his thoughts and feelings. He would join me for coffee in the mornings, engaging in light conversation about his plans for the day. He even started talking about his future, expressing a newfound sense of purpose and direction. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with a smile. "I think I'm starting to figure things out," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "It's not easy, but I'm getting there." I smiled back, feeling a swell of pride and relief. "I'm so proud of you," I said. "You've come a long way." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light of the sun. "Thanks for being there for me," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you." His words touched me deeply, a reminder of the power of presence and patience. It wasn't about having all the answers or solving all the problems. It was about being there, offering support and understanding, and allowing him to find his own way. And as we sat there, watching the sky turn from gold to deep blue, I felt a sense of peace, a belief that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together.